Welcome back. You are listening to Nate the Hate on YouTube, iTunes, and Spotify. Be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you have not already. And with that, I'd like to welcome in my co-host, Modern Vintage Gamer.
Hello, Nate. It's great to be here. It's great to be back. And it's great that you're back after a bit of a hiatus after the Switch 2 announcement that you predicted all the way back many, many weeks ago now. I remember it was a very exciting 48 hours for you. And I know a lot of things had happened. A lot of things were said, a lot of anticipation. But ultimately, you were correct in your prediction. How you doing, Nate? How's everything going? And how are you feeling?
I mean, things are going well, and it was a very hot 24 hours in the lead up to January 16th. And, despite me having said January 16th, I was getting a lot of very kind messages on social media on January 15th saying that I was a liar and that I was lying for fun. And all they had to do was wait a few more hours. All they had to do was wait for the time and the calendar to actually flip over to January 16th. But we know how gamers can be, a little hot-headed, very reactionary. And you know why they're reactionary? Because so many YouTubers are reactionary with their takes. So naturally, the gaming community is going to follow suit from the individuals that they follow so closely with their parasocial relationships. So I do not fault these people for being the way that they are. They're just victims of their environment.
It's true. And you did, hold your ground as you were very confident that this was going to go the way that you predicted, and it absolutely did. So I give you respect, because I think a lot of people would have folded a lot earlier, and maybe that uncertainty and doubt would have crept in potentially, but you were like, nope, I'm going to post my GIF of me just sitting back on my summer chair and just sit back and take it all in, and you buried everyone, and it was very, very good to see. So great job.
Yeah, it was definitely an interesting week. And following those events, I know people were kind of anticipating us to have an episode talking about the Switch 2 reveal trailer, going over some of our thoughts and such.
But it was a bunch of nothing. Come on. It was a 3D render of a handheld system. Wasn't that exciting?
It was a very basic trailer, as was expected. It gave us, a look at some of the concepts, like the mouse Joy-Con and such. But those are things that we will discuss in the near future as the April 2nd Direct nears, where we'll give some of our thoughts on the Switch 2 and also what we're predicting and expecting from the April 2nd Direct. But also following the reveal, it was also kind of a state of mind for me of just, you know what, I'm going to take a step back due to a lot of the just harassment that was thrown my way, because we've never recorded an episode, nor do I go to social media to gloat or say I was right. That's not me. I don't come out there looking for accolades. And I definitely wasn't going to record an episode to come out and say, oh, look, I was right. It was kind of like, you know what? If you're going to come into a comment section, if you're going to go to Twitter, if you're going to go to social media, forums, wherever, and you're going to slur insults and just throw such things at me, fine, do what you're going to do. But the odds are, I see these. I read these, I see these on social media, and I'm not running away from it, but I'm going to take a step back and I'm going to say, you know what? I don't need to record an episode to go over this stuff right now. I'll come back when I want to and discuss things when you and I feel the time is right. And took a little bit of a vacation, reset ourselves, and now we're back to get into the flow of things and talk about what Nintendo has coming up this week, which is a Nintendo Direct, surprising a lot of people, as no one anticipated Nintendo would have a Direct, or really any presentation, before the April 2nd Switch 2 dedicated Direct. But here comes Nintendo, doing the unexpected, as they always typically do.
To hold that thought for a sec, Nate, because I did want to bring something up real quick. So I was at GDC last week, as you know, and I did my first ever GDC panel, which I was very excited about. Someone in the audience approached me and they said, hey, MVG, I'm a big fan. Just want to know, and if you can pass on to Nate when you're recording your next episode. And I told him, I said, we're probably going to have an episode out this week. However, what I didn't realize was that there is a Nintendo Direct this week. And that is the focus of today's episode. But I will say that at GDC, I know that there was an announcement or a report by, I believe it was Andy from VGC, Andy Robinson, who was the first to mention, at least on an outlet, that there was potentially some kind of announcement from Nintendo this week, a direct potentially. I'd also heard similar things about Nintendo doing something this week.
So I first heard about something happening this week just over a week ago. So before GDC took place, I didn't have full details as to what it would be. That came after there was a little bit of discussion over the weekend where rumors started to become public, where I was like, okay, let me check in, see if I can get an update to see what was happening. And that's when I heard, there would be a direct that Nintendo has now officially announced. And, it's a curious thing for them to do because naturally everyone is anticipating just the Switch 2 direct next week. That's where everyone's hype and focus is. And here comes Nintendo saying, wait a minute, the Switch is still here, still have games coming to this platform, and we would like to relay some news to you about this. So it's interesting timing, especially when you look at the entire month of February and even the opening weeks of March were absent from Nintendo doing anything of any significance. So it kind of felt as though Nintendo could have done this, last month and still given out the news and got a nice reception. Doing it so close to the Switch 2 feels like a very deliberate act.
I agree.
And it's just very interesting timing for them to do it this way. And maybe it's just an appetizer to satiate Nintendo fans of, hey, you have the Switch, here's some games coming, and here's some third-party announcements. And then next week, you're going to get the full course meal of what's coming a little later this year when the Switch 2 launches. But in the immediacy for the Switch, here's some stuff to kind of hold you over and keep you hyped. And it also keeps Nintendo in the news cycle for the better part of the next couple of weeks, where you're going to be talking about Switch games. Next week, you're talking about Switch 2 games. So Nintendo is going to be kind of a focal point in terms of industry conversation.
Yeah, it's definitely very interesting timing, but it also kind of makes sense because, like you said, there's you kind of getting that appetizer before the main course, like you said, where it's going to be a very busy, 7 days for Nintendo. And for people that are Nintendo fans, and obviously people that are listening to this, most of you are probably already Nintendo fans that own Nintendo Switches. And I think ultimately this is pretty good timing, to kind of do this and potentially just kind of split them apart as well. So there's no kind of dilution of Switch games in a Switch 2 Direct, for example. I think that's a very, very smart move. But yeah, the timing is very curious. But I also feel like business has to continue, and the Switch is still a very, very popular system that is still selling quite well considering its age at this point. So I think Nintendo is making sure that they haven't forgotten about existing customers. Sure, there's going to be a lot of people that all they are interested in right now is the Switch 2, but there's still going to be people out there that maybe just bought Switches, last holiday or within a 12-month window, and they're not necessarily ready to just upgrade yet to the next thing. So they have to be also, taken care of and accounted for. So I think this is a good move. But the question is, what are we talking about as far as what we'll see at this direct? That's the question. I guess we're going to dive into that right now and try to figure that out.
Yeah, I think we'll open the predictions portion of the episode with Nintendo predictions because I think that is the software most people are going to be interested in is what could Nintendo possibly have here as we are in that tail end of the Switch life cycle as far as before the Switch 2 is introduced. And there's plenty of rumors out there of Switch games that are still to be announced, like Kirby, Planet Robobot, and such. So, what games from Nintendo could potentially be here? And I'll give a prediction of something that we will not see here, at least in my opinion.
Yep.
We will not see Metroid Prime 2 or 3.
Yeah, I don't think so. Like, I feel like I know we have predicted, I think it was the last direct, potentially, we may have predicted Metroid Prime 2 was going to maybe show up. But I think that window has now closed, for that. We're not saying it doesn't exist. I still think that game does exist in some capacity, and it's one of the cards that Nintendo has in their hand. But yeah, I don't expect to see Metroid Prime 2 at this direct. Just doesn't fit.
Yeah, for me, I think that window for Metroid Prime 2 has come and gone. And even when the rumors and talk of it had surfaced several years ago, it was always that it was going to be a lesser version compared to Metroid Prime 1 remastered. It wasn't going to be as detailed, as much work as that release got. It was going to be more of a basic HD version.
Right.
So, with that in mind, I'm kind of thinking that if Metroid Prime 2 is to come to, let's say, the Switch or even Switch 2, I think it's going to be an NSO GameCube type of release at this point.
Yep.
I just don't see there that being that much value in bringing Metroid Prime 2 as a native release to the hardware at this state, especially with Metroid Prime 4 looming just over the horizon. I
Yes.
think it's way too much time has gone. Metroid Prime 2 needed to come a year ago. So I don't think we would see that game in any capacity here. And that brings us to Metroid Prime 4 of would it be at this Nintendo Direct? Would we get a deeper look at the game since we got our first look last year? And I would side with no. We do not see Metroid Prime 4 here for a very simple reason. I believe that game will be a launch title on the Switch too, and I would hold it until next week. Make that kind of a focal point of that direct for a Nintendo game. Show Metroid Prime 4, give the release date, which would also be the release date for the Switch 2. And you just have to make a little mention of also coming to Nintendo Switch. If you show it at this direct and you don't give it a release date, it's just going to conjure up some unnecessary concern of, oh, well, when is this game coming out? And then all of that gets answered a week later. But why even put yourself in that position? Just don't have the game here at all. I would suspect most people, if not everyone, is already anticipating that Metroid Prime 4 is coming to Switch 2 anyways. So its absence, I don't think would really net any negative or concern. And I think people would just be accepting of, oh, we're going to see it next week. No big deal.
So initially, I would probably disagree with you. I kind of felt like Nintendo, they announced Metroid Prime 4 for the Switch many, many years ago. And they're going to end it with a release date announcement for the Nintendo Switch. Kind of just bookend the whole saga of Metroid Prime 4. But you have to go back and think about how they handled Breath of the Wild between the Switch and the Wii U. And you're right, like once the new hardware was announced, the focus was on the new platform, and the previous console's version, in this instance the Switch, which is what I'm calling it now, was kind of the afterthought. And sure, it was still announced and it was still discussed and everything, but the focus was definitely on the new platform. So I can't really feel any differently about this, Nate. I think you're right. I was kind of holding firm that, yeah, look, maybe Prime 4 will show up at this because this is why they're having this direct. But it makes more sense if they just leave it up their sleeve for the April the 2nd Switch 2 direct. And then they'll, like you said, they'll either tack on something at the end of it. Maybe they'll just shadow drop the Switch trailer for it. Maybe it's a Twitter drop at that point. I mean, people are going to be talking about Metroid Prime 4 either way, and people will know that it's going to be available on both systems. So Nintendo doesn't really need to spend too much time, trying to push people to take a look at a really cool Switch trailer for the game at that point. I think it's pretty much, already known about at that point.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's where this direct has that potential of being a really interesting presentation from a Nintendo output standpoint, where are we going to see anything that is truly shocking, or are we going to see more of releases that we tend to see from Nintendo when we get towards an end of a console generation? So a title like Kirby Planet Robobot kind of fits that trend where it's a quality game, but it is somewhat of a lesser release. There's also been, Fire Emblem 4 Remake, Genealogy of the Holy War. Will that finally surface? This has been a game that was in development years ago. This is a game that, to my understanding, was finished and Nintendo has just been sitting on it. Or could we maybe see another Fire Emblem game just in general? Is there something else that was in development that Nintendo has been waiting to release within the Fire Emblem series? And, Fire Emblem games, especially during the Switch generation, have been very prolific. We've
Yep.
seen several of them, but they're also titles that we do see kind of towards the tail end of a console generation, as we saw with the 3DS when Fire Emblem Shadows of Valentia came out. I believe it was just on the cusp of the Switch launch, if not the same year. So seeing that repeat here wouldn't surprise of us getting some form of a Fire Emblem game and it being revealed in this direct. But beyond these games, the only other thing I could really envision from Nintendo that would generate headlines and maybe some meaningful excitement would maybe be an NSO update where we get some new, N64 games, maybe new games of the mature rated line, and things of that nature. Because right now, I would look at NSO output, and I'm not sure what the last significant release was for the platform.
It's been a hot minute. I mean, there's obviously been some smaller things that have come out. Donkey Kong 94, great game by the way, on NSO. But we haven't seen any kind of the big announcements. Anything kind of meaningful on the N64, for example, for a while. So yeah, I mean that's an interesting point. What else could there be? I'm going to throw something out of left field, Nate. I think, and again, this is predictions, guys. So please, outlets, don't run any stories. I don't know anything. I'm just putting things into the universe. You know what, Nate? I think Yoshi's Woolly World is just going to appear at this direct because why not?
I mean, it is a fantastic game, and it's one of the few Wii U port or Wii U games that haven't been ported over to the Switch.
Yes, exactly. And I think it's just going to just magically show up.
I would definitely welcome Woolly World because I think that is the best Yoshi game since Yoshi's Island from the Super NES. And,
Absolutely. It's a
you
it's a
know,
crime that it's on the Switch.
it is a crime. It being trapped on the Wii U, yes, there is a 3DS downport, but I mean, that's the inferior way to play. But the fact that it isn't on the Switch is so disappointing because the game deserves a larger audience. It was masterfully crafted. There's so much magic and whimsical elements to that game, and more people should experience it. And to go back to like NSO, I think if they could come out and just give us a bit of a roadmap of
Mhm.
some upcoming N64 games,
That
it
would
would
be
generate
nice.
a lot of hype for the platform. Because if you come out and say, oh, Diddy Kong Racing is coming to the platform, Donkey Kong 64, Conker's Bad Fur Day,
Yep.
people will be like, whoa,
Yeah.
those are some exciting games. Like, yes, Donkey Kong 64 is a mini game hell. It's probably a game not many people want to revisit. They'll boot up the game, hear the rap, and say, I've had my fill.
But I mean, not many people like that game. It's obviously very polarizing, but if you're going to play that game, having some save states and some rewind, I mean, that's kind of the way you want to play it, right?
Yeah, probably. I mean, I think I'd be curious to revisit Conker's Bad Fur Day
Oh, I love that game. I'll play
because you
that
see, we
again.
grew up with it, so we have nostalgia goggles.
Yep.
And there's definitely elements of the game that have not aged well. Some of the cultural references, be it the Matrix and such, that if you're a younger gamer and you're playing it for the first time on NSO, you might kind of be confused as to what the game is referencing.
Yeah.
And then, Diddy Kong Racing, a phenomenal
Uh,
game. You
Great
announced
game.
that for NSO with the online multiplayer. I mean, I'd be there day one booting it up. I'd be probably picking Banjo in the game where
Yeah.
he spoke and he was actually coherent, unlike how he sounds in the game. And that's another game potentially for NSO, Banjo Tooie.
Yeah. Yeah. Banjo Tooie. That'd be a
All those
great get.
all those rare games.
Yep. The ones that I said would never come to NSO. I know Sean still
Yeah. Sean reminds you every time.
reminds me all the time about it.
But I think NSO could definitely be something that they would communicate here because it's a Switch Direct. NSO is still just on Switch. Switch 2 isn't out yet. So just give us a nice little roadmap of what's to come and keep people subscribed and interested in the service. But as far as these predictions for Nintendo, I'm not sure what else I could envision from them. Like
Yeah.
there could be some smaller releases of franchises that we're just not thinking of, but I just have a hard time thinking of what would Nintendo bring in terms of a new release
Right.
at this late stage that they wouldn't feel is better served to be a cross-gen release on the Switch 2 or a Switch 2 exclusive.
Yeah. I mean, the more that I think about the NSO kind of roadmap, it does make more sense. Because again, Nintendo wants people to continue to use their services. They want people to use Nintendo account and subscribe to NSO. They want all that stuff to carry over to the new system. It does make a lot of sense having a meaningful NSO update with, we'll just say 3 or 4 games that get announced over the course of the next few months going into summer. I think that would be really cool.
Yeah, I think that's an area that would definitely serve them well here. But beyond that, yeah, I have a hard time thinking of anything else Nintendo could do. Like I said, I'm not expecting Metroid Prime 2, 3, or 4 at this direct.
And would I'm guessing you would consider Wind Waker HD like Prime 2 at that point. Like I feel like the door on that's closed as well. And if they were going to announce new Zelda
Yeah.
stuff, that would be at a Switch 2 direct.
Yeah, I feel like if Wind Waker is to come to the Switch family of platforms, it would be an NSO GCN type release at this point.
Yeah.
I just can't envision it. And I would also extend that to F-Zero GX.
Mm-hmm.
I think that would be an NSO type release at this point.
Right. That's
So
why I threw Yoshi's Woolly World in there, because I feel like they have a trick up their sleeve that we don't know about yet.
ideally,
Yeah.
I mean, I hope that is the case where it is just a game that's quality. It's not a huge release, but it's a game that has an established reputation behind it that people can get excited behind. And it can come out at, let's say, somewhat of a budget release, be it $40 or $50, which I
Yeah.
know is rare and would be quite surprising for Nintendo to do. But if they could employ something like that just to generate a little more interest in the releases, because once the Switch 2 Direct does happen next week, that's where people are going to shift a lot of their focus and even some of their budget, where they're going to start budgeting to be able to purchase games for the Switch 2. So
Right.
as you're bringing out some late ports or smaller games to the Switch platform, they might want to consider not pricing everything at a full $60, especially if it's not a cross-gen release or it doesn't have enhancements on the Switch 2. If it's just going to be a base Switch game that would look and play identical on the Switch 2 via backwards compatibility, people are going to begin to allocate their assets for the Switch 2, be it for the hardware, launch games, and such. And you don't want to be competing against yourself. So offer people some budget releases. I would love for Nintendo to finally introduce the Select line for the Switch, where we get, $30 first party releases as a standard MSRP.
Yeah.
We've seen them do
Absolutely.
it before late in a console generation. I would love to see that happen with the Switch. Will they do it? Who knows? They're still selling millions of copies of Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom, Mario Kart 8 at a full $60 price tag or $70 in Tears of the Kingdom situation. So they really don't have much incentive to offer a budget line, but I would love to see that happen. So we'll see. Maybe Nintendo will surprise us with some announcements in the direct from themselves, but I'm going in with fairly low expectation when it
Yeah.
comes to Nintendo output here.
Yeah. I'm the same. Like there'll be some nice announcements, and usually there'll be something for everyone, but I wouldn't expect anything huge here. I think it's really, again, just kind of preparing themselves and just kind of sorting out their house before the big reveal next week.
And now that brings us to the third party aspect. And much like the first party side, I'm not exactly high on the third party announcement reveals for this particular direct, because if your game was something of significance, if it was a game that Nintendo viewed as a priority, be it as a cross-gen release or potentially coming to the Switch 2, I feel that Nintendo would have communicated with the partner that we can highlight you at the Switch 2 showcase. And that's not to say the games here from third parties are lesser games, but these are games that are strictly targeting the Switch base platform. And I just envision these are going to be a lot of late ports and smaller style releases.
Yeah, I think so. And this is very difficult to predict. I mean, it's always difficult to predict a direct it. I think it's even harder at this point when there's obviously the elephant in the room is literally just around the corner from its announcement. Yeah, this is a tough one, but I think you're right in general. There's obviously games that have been in development, for a couple of years now, third-party games that are targeting the Switch, and it's probably time for some of those to get announced. But the question is, well, what would that be? And that's the difficult part. I mean, obviously, Silksong is a game that I think we always talk about.
Why must you bring that one up?
And it just got what happened today? It ended up on the Steam DB library or something. So people are talking about it again. Mm-hmm. Is Silksong gonna show up at this direct, Nate? I don't think it will.
I mean, Silksong has to show up at something eventually. It's just a question of where is it going to show up. And I think people are really torn on the proper venue for the game to appear. Would it be at a Nintendo Direct for the Switch? Will it be at the Switch 2 Direct? Will it be at an Xbox showcase? Where will it be? Because it is a day one Game Pass game. The last time we saw the game was at the Xbox June showcase a couple of years ago. So where is the game going to make an appearance?
Yeah.
And the only thing that gives me pause in regards to it being at the Switch 2 showcase would be, does Team Cherry even have a Switch 2 dev kit?
It's a great question. I guess we'll find out.
I mean, it's a development team of 5 people. They've made one game. Did Nintendo prioritize them getting a dev kit to have that as, let's say, a launch release for the Switch 2? Or was it more a case of Nintendo sitting there saying, we have other partners we have to prioritize above you, so if we are to showcase your game, it would be at a Switch 1 Direct because it's not going to be at the Switch 2 at launch. So it's really complicated with that game. And as for other third parties, I've heard of many third-party games coming to the Switch 2.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as games coming to the current Switch, it's definitely more difficult to figure out where the plans are for a lot of these companies. A lot of them are trying to prioritize their upcoming projects to be on Switch 2. So what type of games can they port over this late into the console generation, or what titles do they already have in development? And, you look at Western companies, be it an EA, Ubisoft and such, and you have to imagine all of their focus is now on Switch 2.
Right.
They could still have some smaller games come to the Switch, but primarily they're focusing on Switch 2 so they can begin some ports and everything and have some strong representation within that launch window and net big sales. So what could really be that surprising third-party announcement here? And right now I'm struggling to come up with anything.
Yeah. We have to go back and I mean, we've predicted directs for many, many years since pretty much the Switch started, many, many years ago. And there's obviously been some games that were predicted that have just kind of fallen away that we haven't talked about for a while because obviously they've been in development hell. So maybe it's time. Like I know last year we were talking about Metal Slug Tactics, but that's obviously come and gone. But can you remember any other games that had some type of hype around them and then we just didn't hear from them for a while? Maybe it's their time to shine, to come back into the spotlight. But yeah, I got nothing, man. Honestly, like I'm gonna just will something into the universe, and it's not something that I would say is just out of reach. I'm gonna say the Mass Effect trilogy is gonna get announced at this direct.
Okay. It's really difficult, especially when you look at some of the output that a lot of the more prominent partners have put out over the last couple of years. You could definitely see that they began to focus and spec their games on PS5 or Xbox Series X. and they began to abandon Xbox One and PS4. So that makes those down ports a little more difficult
Yeah.
to bring to the Switch platform. So, I mean, yeah, there could be plenty of, let's say, double A studios bigger than an indie studio, but definitely not a triple A third party effort that we could see representation of here. But I can't think of anything that I would give a strong prediction
Yeah.
behind.
Yeah.
It I can't even think of like a late port that I could really envision being here that would be like, whoa, that's so cool. Maybe some of the stuff that we have seen leak on like the Korean or Australian rating boards.
Mhm.
Maybe Capcom gives a trailer for Onimusha 2 at this
Yeah.
direct because it comes out in May.
Yeah, it's
But
possible. I mean, Sega may
stuff
show
in
up.
that vein.
Sega could show up with some of the things they're working on. I mean, we obviously have seen Shinobi, but we haven't seen any updates from Crazy Taxi, potentially. But yeah, I
Right,
mean,
Crazy Taxi, Streets of Rage, all that Renaissance line.
yeah,
So it's complicated as to really what could we end up seeing here from
Konami could show
these
up
third
with
parties.
some Onimusha stuff, potentially. Capcom, I'm sorry, not Konami. Capcom could show up with Onimusha 2.
Yeah, like that's the only thing I could really envision from Capcom. Maybe you get a new trailer for the Capcom collection with Power Stone and such,
Right.
because I believe that hasn't come out yet, right?
Yeah. No, it has not.
That's I think is that May?
Yes, it is May.
Okay.
Yeah.
So things like that, I could see having that representation. I'm sure there's some bigger third party that Nintendo has a contractual obligation to have in a direct that they would have here that generate some excitement. But I'm just going into this direct kind of with low expectations. I'm not that high on it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it doesn't mean the show's not going to be, good or quality. It's just a direct that came at a very unexpected time. And with it being what appears to be the final Switch direct, it's very difficult to predict
Right.
because, this is kind of the closing of the Switch. And we really want to pivot our focus to the Switch 2, where we can get excited for some of those brand new releases from Nintendo, see what ports and new releases third parties have planned for the platform, and all of that. You want to see what's new
Mhm.
because I don't know about you, but for me personally, for the last maybe 6 to 8 months, I'm ready to take the Switch out of its dock, put it in its box,
Yep.
and let it rest.
I'm with you. I haven't powered my Switch on for quite some time. In fact, I'm trying to think of the last game that I really sat down and played on the Switch, and it's been a while. I mean, Prince of Persia comes to mind, but I think I've played some stuff since then, but it's been a little bit like I haven't really played any of the more recent first party games because none of them really are that interesting to me, especially the ones I've already played and beaten previously. But so, yeah, I'm ready. I'm ready, Nate. I'm right there. Now, let me ask you this. This is going to be, a Switch Direct, but will there be anything about Switch 2 in this Direct, you think? Any other than, by the way, stay tuned, or, join us next on April the 2nd for the Switch 2 stuff. Do you think there'll be anything
No.
beyond that?
I think at most it would just be a mention of tune in next week for a detailed look at the Switch 2, where we show games and a more detailed look at the hardware. But beyond that, I can't see them acknowledging the Switch 2.
Yeah.
There's no purpose. You're far too close to the already advertised Switch 2 Direct to make any mention here.
Yeah, and that'll be the big one, and we will definitely be all over that with lots of information once all that stuff comes out. But yeah, this is an interesting one from Nintendo. A lot of people, I feel like, think that they just kind of threw this in at the last minute, but I don't necessarily agree with that. I think Nintendo's, had this kind of plan for a while as just the the direct that will just let people know that it's business as usual. on the Switch for the foreseeable future. And this is kind of how they do that.
Yeah, that's the thing, is that the Switch isn't going to be abandoned just because the Switch 2 is introduced. The Switch is going to get support well into 2026, likely even into 2027. Now, what does that support look like is, that remains to be seen. Is that support going to be Nintendo bringing one or two smaller releases every year? Are we going to get a big release, be it something in the vein of Pokemon Legends or even Gen 10 for Pokemon in late 2026? And Nintendo would say, okay, we're still supporting the Switch if they make Gen 10 a cross-platform or a cross-generational release. And then if NSO is still getting updates and new releases on the Switch, as long as third parties and indies are still bringing games to the platform, Nintendo themselves will continue to support the Switch, as I said, through 2025, 2026, maybe even into 2027 with some smaller releases. You're not going to get the big AAA releases like the new 3D Mario or Mario Kart or anything like that.
Right.
But they can still bring smaller games, ports of older games if they see fit. And it's just going to be, we just have to see how Nintendo approaches that long-term support after the Switch 2 comes to market. But the Switch still has several years of support to come. Will it be enough to keep the consumer engaged? We'll find out when time comes. And this Direct is just kind of Nintendo's way of saying the Switch is still here. We're still going to support it. Here's some games coming out. And ideally, for those who won't be buying the Switch at launch or maybe even this year, Nintendo is able to cater to your taste with some quality releases. But I'm definitely interested to see what this Direct has to offer, despite me going in with very low expectation. And that's not to, dampen the hype for anyone. If you're excited about this Direct, go in with some excitement. I hope the show has games that cater to your specific taste. For me, I am just ready to see what the Switch 2 is going to bring us and offer us in terms of software, new features, and all of that. And I'm just ready to move on from the Switch. It's been a very long generation, and I kind of need something new and exciting in terms of game releases and just to get my interest. And it's not that Switch isn't of interest anymore. It's just, it's old.
Yeah.
And I want to see exciting third party releases come to the platform. And it just feels as though everything is beginning to wane down on the Switch. And that's fine. But even as you mentioned, with some of Nintendo's more recent releases, like Xenoblade Chronicle X just came out. If you've never played the game, it's a fantastic game. Play it. I played it on the Wii U. I don't need to revisit it.
Yoshi's Woolly World, though, I'm revisiting that if it gets announced.
If priced right, I think I would revisit. I wouldn't revisit it for $60.
No. If they price it at 40 or 50, I'm all over it. But yeah, if it's full price at 60, I'm probably not going to get it.
Yeah, so I mean that's how I would approach Nintendo doing any type of late ports. It's just going to come down to that pricing, and I hope that they're more budget releases. But I hope Nintendo surprises us with this Nintendo Direct and brings some very surprising, unexpected first-party announcements and releases, because I know that segment wasn't all that long for us, and we really didn't give that many predictions of what we think could be there, more so of what we're not expecting to be there, which was pretty much everything.
Well, we'll definitely have a lot more to share over the coming weeks. There's a lot of stuff coming. So we're just kind of getting back into the swing of things, and I think this was a good way to do it. But yeah, very exciting next few weeks for Nintendo. I'm eagerly anticipating everything that comes our way.
Yes, and our next episode will be our thoughts and predictions on what the April 2nd Switch 2 Direct could have. We will have that available at the start of next week, so a few days before the April 2nd Direct takes place. And then we will have a podcast following the April 2nd Direct of our reaction and thoughts to the Direct and what Nintendo has shown. So we will have a couple of episodes available in just over the next week to 10 days. So definitely look forward to that. And we will return with YouTube membership and Streamlab questions in those coming episodes. This one was just a very quick episode to get some thoughts out and some predictions on the upcoming Nintendo Direct this week. And I'd like to thank MVG for joining me as always.
Always a pleasure, Nate. Thanks for having me on.
And let us know your thoughts in the comment section below of what you think Nintendo and third parties could have at this Nintendo Direct. And be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you have not already. And continue to embrace the hate.
With Nate and MVG, dissecting all the lies. Make the hate rocket hard, MVG dropping knowledge bombs. This podcast sitting strong, guiding us where we belong. Through the pixels and the codes, breaking down what future holds. Nate and MVG showing us the gaming gold.